The best revenge is to not be like your enemy. We all love a good revenge story, the tale of a man who has been wronged, betrayed, or seen his loved ones come to harm. We enjoy seeing him vow vengeance upon those responsible, devise a plan, and then carry out his retribution swiftly and forcefully. After all, they deserve it. What kind of man murders a helpless puppy or falsely accuses his best friend of treason because he lusts after his woman? We get great satisfaction at seeing these evil men being brought to justice, but is it justice? Many that live deserve death. Many that die deserve life. Can you give it them?
Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment.
Justice, after all, is meant to heal, to keep peace, to mete out proper punishment for crimes committed, to assure a community, a city, a country that the law is enforced and order is reestablished. Revenge, on the other hand, is ordered toward internal gratification, toward satisfying a particular individual's overwhelming desire to witness the downfall of those who have wronged him. In seeking justice, we seek the good of others. In lusting for vengeance, we serve only ourselves. Thus, we can distinguish between the two by asking one simple question: who do you fight for? From the very beginning of Gladiator, we see what Maximus fights for. Indeed, the very first shot of the movie is not of the war against the Germanic barbarians, not of the violence of battle, but rather of a man walking through a serene field of grass and grain. Maximus does not dream of glory and honor, but rather of home, of the peaceful life on his farm with his wife and son. In that, he embodies the ideal soldier, one who fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. His words to his men as they prepare to charge headlong into enemy lines are not an exhortation to glory through battle, but rather an encouragement to look beyond the death and destruction of today.
3 weeks from now, I will be harvesting my crops. Imagine where you will be, and it will be so.
The man consumed with revenge is dominated by the desire to be satisfied now, with no regard for what lies beyond his vengeful goal. The just man knows that violence and death cannot satisfy, that they are, at best, a means to an end, and such an end must be a very high good indeed if it is to be worth the price which is paid in blood.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
A just general will not throw away the lives of his men, heedlessly trying to win glory for himself. If Maximus were such a reckless and careless leader, he would not command the respect of his soldiers that is clear and obvious in the way they react to him. Maximus leads from the front, risking his own life just as he asks every one of his men to risk theirs, providing an example of courage, fortitude, and, yes, battlefield ferocity to which every legionnaire can aspire. By contrast, we have Commodus, arriving well after the battle has ended, timing which I'm sure was just pure coincidence, traveling in an armored coach, attempting to quite literally replace Maximus at Marcus Aurelius' side. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Commodus because that's not the point of this video, but I have to point out how he basically wants to be Maximus without doing any of the work that actually made Maximus Maximus. Even Commodus' swordsmanship comes from a staged and choreographed training sequence. Remember that for later. It's clear from the first moments we meet him that Commodus serves one man: himself. Such an attitude is, of course, the complete opposite of that of Maximus. In his post-battle conversation with Marcus Aurelius, who is feeling rather cynical regarding his legacy of expansion and conquering, Maximus comes alight when the emperor asks him to describe his home. In his enthusiasm, we witness once again the true reason why Maximus fights with such bravery and passion.
It's a good home, worth fighting for.
The general is here because it is his duty, because he believes in Rome as the light, because he loves his men, but not because he seeks his own gain. He has no desire to use his vaunted position in the military as a step to greater authority, influence, and power. Thus, when Marcus Aurelius offers him the position of protector of Rome, the man tasked with guiding the city back to its former status as a republic, Maximus answers simply,
With all my heart, no.
Maximus, that is why. It must be you.
I absolutely love that line from Marcus Aurelius. Men who covet power are almost always the ones who deserve it the least, as they seek only to glorify themselves, to pursue ever-increasing wealth and status, jealously holding on to every shred of authority that they can. Men who are reluctant to assume power, who desire a simple life, who find satisfaction in loving their families and tending to their land, are the ones who truly care about the people over whom they would rule, because they understand that most men desire to live as they desire to live, not in gaudy splendor, but simply in the comforting presence of honest work and freely given family love. And so, understanding them, they can then better serve those men as a great leader ought to serve his subjects. Leadership is a responsibility, a duty. When positions of power become prizes, things fought for and won by the strongest, the richest, and the most cutthroat, that fundamental truth is lost. Commodus speaks of becoming Caesar because he desires the respect of his subjects and the authority to shape Rome as he sees fit. When Maximus changes his mind regarding the offer from his emperor, it is not because the position of protector of Rome has suddenly become more appealing to his sense of vainglory, but rather because his sense of duty reasserted itself when he was faced with the alternative should he refuse.
Well, you served my brothers, you served his father.
When Commodus himself repeats that question, Maximus naturally turns him down because he's not an idiot, and in doing so, condemns himself to death. His one mistake, however, was expecting Commodus to have any measure of mercy within him. Good men have a difficult time imagining the depths of depravity capable by those who live only for themselves, who are willing to commit the most heinous of crimes in order to achieve their self-serving ends. How did it serve Commodus to have Maximus's wife and son executed? In no other way other than to simply send a message that traitors forfeit not only their own lives, but the lives of their loved ones. Tyrants rule through fear. They know how powerful a motivator love is, but they merely see it as another tool by which they can control their subjects. They do not understand the reality of such love.
Whisper to them I live only to hold them again, for all else is dust and air.
It's worth noting that Maximus, upon escaping from the Praetorians, does not return to the army, does not attempt a coup, does not try to fulfill his duty as he promised Marcus Aurelius, or rather was about to promise Marcus Aurelius before the emperor was murdered. Instead, he goes home. A man certainly has a duty to his country, and his family may even have to make sacrifices so that he can carry out that duty, but there can be no doubt that duty to family ultimately comes first. People matter more than the nation, the city, the community which binds them together. Those things can and will pass away, but each individual member of those collectives will outlive all human civilizations. That does not mean, however, that those who acknowledge that metaphysical reality reject this world as meaningless due to its temporal nature. Rather, they believe
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
And so, when Maximus discovers his wife and son dead, he weeps for them, for the love he can no longer share with them, for the lives they could have led, for the great deeds his son cannot now do, for all that is good and beautiful in family life. And though he yearns to see them again, he does not rush to death's door. Yet he also does not clear his head, brush the dirt off his tunic, and get back to his task of turning Rome into a republic once again. Great man though he may be, Maximus is still just a man who loved deeply and thus could be wounded deeply. So he drifts, despondent, purposeless, almost mindless, until he is once again called upon to fight. But first, his mettle must be tested, and I love this scene because it displays his lack of care brilliantly. Maximus weathers the strikes from this Goliath's wooden sword as if nothing can hurt him anymore. He has already been broken down and torn apart beyond repair. A few ribs being cracked can hardly make a difference, or so he thinks. There is still a spark within him, a light which will not let him simply give in and accept a gladiator's sword through the heart. Perhaps he would have allowed that if he were not chained to a fellow slave in their first bout. I suspect Maximus was urged to fight, not for his own sake, but for that of the man who had shown him kindness, the man for whose life he found himself suddenly responsible. For the first time in weeks or months, Maximus was given someone to fight for, which is, of course, what all men want. The need for purpose, for something to work towards, some goal we hope to achieve, is so deeply rooted in the male psyche that it defies description or explanation. It simply is. To the point that, without meaningful purpose, men languish and fade, simply going through whatever motions have been ordained for them.
I'm required to kill, so I kill. That is enough.
The man we see here is but a faint shadow of the general who led his men into battle in that German forest. His station stripped away, his honor destroyed, his very family taken from him in brutal and cruel fashion, Maximus has become an empty vessel, a simpleton practically, who will do what is asked of him, what is required to keep on living, because he still holds on to that shred of honor and pride that will not let him roll over and die. As Proximo proclaims,
We're all dead men. We can decide how we meet that end.
in fact, we see Maximus embrace the gladiatorial life with something akin to enthusiasm in the scene where he mows through one opponent after another. If he truly wanted to just die, he could have. Maximus is clearly a talented enough swordsman that he could have even made it look good, given the crowd a good show with his death, but he doesn't. Partly due to his own pride, partly due to Proximo's exhortation to die well, but also out of sheer hatred for the act in which he partakes and his urge to express that contempt. A man such as Maximus has seen a great deal of death and has dealt out more than his fair share of it. His years at war brought him face to face with the sheer ugliness of violence, and so he lashes out at the crowd who has come to revel in the sights, sounds, and smells of death.
Are you not entertained?
Incredible cinematic moment? Absolutely. Righteous condemnation of gladiatorial combat as a spectator sport? 100%. The virtuous act of a man fully in control of himself? Not exactly. When purpose and meaning have been lost, when we find ourselves in another course of action, will we come to love the path we have chosen, or that more likely has been chosen for us? Will we find within it some goal to pursue, some principle to uphold, or any reason at all to walk it other than just because? If not, then we will come to despise it, probably because it wasn't a healthy course of action in the first place. But Maximus does eventually find some purpose in the path that has been thrust upon him after Proximo reveals that he too was once a gladiator, and that he won his freedom granted by the emperor himself.
I too want to stand in front of the Emperor, as you did.
Maximus's motivation is, however, quite obviously a vengeful one. His intent to win the crowd and thus to force the current Caesar to meet him face to face would provide him with the perfect opportunity to ram a blade through Commodus's gut. And while we're on the subject of the crowd, I want to talk about the contrasting visions of Commodus and Proximo. In the upstart Caesar's mind, the gladiator games are a way to sate the people, to take their minds off of whatever daily worries might leave them unsatisfied with their lives, to turn attention away from the flaws in his own rule. Commodus has nothing of substance to offer as an emperor, as a leader, or as a man. He is an empty toga who has only ever lusted for power and self-satisfaction, and thus cannot give of himself for the sake of his people. So instead, he commands others to be given, that is, to sacrifice their lives in a brutal, bloody distraction. In doing so, Commodus believes he is wielding power. After all, he can command men to fight to the death, and he can choose mercy or judgment for any given gladiator. But Proximo knows better. As Senator Greco noted,
Rome is the mob.
which is a snooty bourgeoisie way to say that the will of the people is superior to the will of one man, even the emperor himself. Proximo knows that the gladiator himself wields the true power. The crowd's eyes are on him, eagerly and admiringly watching every shift of his foot and stroke of his sword. His actions are the ones which will bring them ecstasy or misery. Men do not want to be inert, slothful, and satiated. They want to be enthused, to feel as if they are a part of great deeds and heroic feats. And so the skilled gladiator can shape the crowd's emotions, the crowd's will, according to his desire, which at present moment is for Maximus one thing. He had been emptied out and left despairing and despondent by the murder of his family, and has been given purpose once more now that Proximo has revealed that the vengeance which he seeks is not fully out of reach. Is this a good purpose? No. At least it is not yet pure. The given action which Maximus pursues, that is, killing Commodus, is not inherently wrong. Obviously, Maximus as a soldier would know that there are occasions when killing other men is in fact justified. But he must ask himself, what do I fight for now? Why do I seek to kill once again? After being reduced to nothing and losing all sense of direction, Maximus has rediscovered purpose. But that purpose is himself. Vengeance serves me. I exact it so that I will feel some sense of catharsis. It is not just, because justice serves others, not self. But self-service is all too easy to fall into when stripped of hopes, dreams and meaning itself, the only thing remaining so often is simply me, my immediate needs, and my raw, untamed emotions. Men need purpose. When the higher and better ones which they would rather pursue are lost to them, they will latch on to any other goal, mission, or objective they can, even if said purpose is nothing more than feeding a base desire.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
When Maximus reveals his true identity to Commodus, in one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history, he is at that point.
And I will have my vengeance, in this life or the next.
Is this monologue badass beyond comprehension? You bet. Do I love this scene more than any other outside of Lord of the Rings? Quite possibly. Does Commodus deserve the sentence which Maximus would carry out? Without a doubt. Is this sentiment of Maximus's a good and noble one? No. I will have my vengeance. That is not how Maximus used to speak. The general from before thought only of his men, his family, his emperor, and Rome herself. That is the man to whom Lucilla refers when she visits Maximus in his cell.
I knew a man once, a noble man.
That man is gone. Your brother did his work well.
But of course, that man isn't gone. Perhaps in one way he is. Maximus cannot be the general he once was, cannot now become the protector of Rome as Marcus Aurelius desired, but he can still serve the city, the people. He can live and die for their sake, not his. His conversations with his fellow gladiators serve to cement that idea in his head as they ask him about his history, reminding him of who he was and what he fought for. He may believe that man to be gone, but many other good men do not. They still believe in the name Maximus and all that it stood for.
You have a great name. He must kill your name before he kills you.
Moments before being sent out to duel another renowned gladiator, Maximus decries what has become of Rome.
Marcus Aurelius had a dream that was Rome, Proximo. This is not it.
For the first time since Commodus's betrayal, we hear Maximus speak with vision, with a purpose beyond himself and his own desires. And that vision, those ideas and dreams can live on long after the man who first held them has passed on.
Marcus Aurelius is dead, Maximus. We mortals are but shadows and dust.
Maximus knows that. He knows that his own life, like that of his emperor, is fragile, prone to ending sooner than it ought. So what does it count for then, if he kills Commodus and achieves his vengeful goal? He may slay one tyrant, but a new one will just as easily assume the throne. His earthly life may be shadows and dust, but he knows that what he does with that life matters in an undefinable yet undeniable way.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Though Maximus may now fight for an earthly goal, the returning of Rome to its people, he does so for eternal reasons, because the ideas and values of Marcus Aurelius' vision, of his vision, are timeless. And so when he finds himself victorious in the arena, his enemy beaten yet still alive, and the emperor commanding he let the final, fatal blow fall, Maximus chooses mercy. He rejects the dream of Commodus for that of the true emperor. And then he defies Commodus again, face to face, as the snivelly little rat tries to goad him into getting himself killed by the Praetorians by describing the final, horrific moments of Maximus's wife and son. An outburst to which Maximus simply responds,
The time for honoring yourself will soon be at an end.
What an incredible line. In one sentence, Maximus diagnoses Commodus's worst flaw and gives him his fatal prognosis. Facing down an emperor, surrounded by the emperor's personal guards, weaponless and seemingly defenseless, Maximus refuses to waver. He has rediscovered his true purpose now. He will, as he always had, carry out the wishes, the vision, the dream of the man whom he loved. Not for his sake, but for the sake of Rome. Commodus is and always has been a man for himself. Maximus was such a man, if not nearly as despicable, for a brief time. And he found that self-absorbed mindset base and depraved, lacking any real meaning or value. However, that doesn't mean that Maximus has suddenly gone soft when it comes to Commodus.
I have only one more life to take. Then it is done.
As I said earlier, the motivation behind the act matters greatly. Maximus still intends to carry out this seemingly vengeful act.
I will kill Commodus. The fate of Rome, I leave to you.
But now he intends to depose a tyrant, rather than simply to sate his lust for the blood of the man who killed his family. The man who fights for something greater than himself, will not fear death, because he is not alone in that battle. The greatest love a man can give is that of laying down his life for his friends who will doubtless continue to fight the good fight after he is gone, perhaps with renewed strength and courage due to his example of selfless sacrifice. The man who fights for himself does fear death, because his whole world is the meager supply of days which he has been given. Every bit of meaning and purpose to that man is contained within the temporal bounds of earthly life, and so he fights for everything and anything that his heart desires in a given moment, and thus dreads above all else the day when it is all taken away.
I think you have been afraid all your life.
Fear of the inevitable is perhaps one of the unhealthiest emotions upon which we can dwell. Fear is supposed to drive us to action, to enable us to look ahead, perceive undesirable outcomes, and then work to avoid them. It is meant to temper our foolhardiness, our enthusiasm, and fervor. It is not meant to paralyze us, to prevent us, for example, from actually arriving at the front until we knew the battle would have already been won.
Have I missed it? Have I missed the battle?
You have missed the war.
We should not fear death. We should seek to prevent unnecessary death whenever possible. We should be prudent and cautious with our lives and the lives of others. And yet we must respect and acknowledge its inevitability.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
Death is not a good, but it is a reality, one which, if we have lived our lives as we ought, we can meet with peace and even joy. In the arena, we see Maximus begin to meet that end, as he approaches death's door quite literally, and yet he holds himself back. His mission is not yet complete. After all, he can't let this pathetic little gutter snake get away with shanking him before their duel and pretending that he defeated Rome's greatest warrior in a fair fight. As we saw earlier, Commodus' swordsmanship is as scripted a drama as the farcical stage duel where Maximus defeats Commodus via flatulence. Commodus is as fake a warrior as he is a Caesar, and I'm not too high and mighty to admit that I definitely get some satisfaction out of seeing Maximus take out Commodus with the Emperor's own knife. But now that the deed is done, Maximus is free to go, yes? Well,
Not yet.
in death, in his final moments, Maximus is not thinking of himself, not feeling satisfied at having carried out his vengeance, but is instead, as ever, doing his duty.
There was a dream that was Rome. It shall be realized. These are the wishes of Marcus Aurelius.
He lived, he fought, and he died for the men and women of Rome, for those whom he loved, both living and dead. His last words
Lucius is safe.
speak of a boy whom he met but once, a boy about the same age as his own son. What better way to honor the memory of his boy than to grant Lucius safety, peace, and freedom, to give him the life he would have wanted for his own son? The heights of heroism are so often found in little moments such as this. Decisions made and words spoken that are too easy to miss among the myriad of mighty deeds and epic battles contained within these stories. But Maximus is not forgotten. His victory may only resound in the hearts of those who witness his final moments, but through those men and women, it will reverberate throughout Rome into every corner of the empire.
He was a soldier of Rome. Honor him.
I will leave you with this final thought, dear viewer. The man who cared for his men, who led the charge into battle, who loved home, wife, and child above all earthly things, and who ultimately died for the people whom he loved, is carried away by many willing hands, by the men whose lives he had touched in a profound and indelible way.
Who will help me carry him?
The man who sought only power, who demanded respect and love without giving them in return, who sought to control and use others, who lived only for himself, that man's body was left in the sand, alone. I doubt any of us are as courageous and selfless as Maximus, nor are we as despicably self-serving as Commodus, such is the nature and the point of stories. But every day, we choose to be more like one or the other. A good man, a true man, is one who lives, fights, and if need be, dies for those whom he loves.